All right, welcome to another episode of Sounds Like an HR Problem. This is Yang,
And Ashley, hi.
and we're your hosts for the show. So, just to kind of recap, we did just an intro episode last week, just to kind of share our stories about how we got into HR. And for today, we wanted to, before we get into like the heavy stuff, we wanted to just start with just some fun stories of like crazy stuff that people do in the workplace. So, once again, our show format is going to be we're going to be sharing a story, kind of what happened, how HR handled it, and or how we handled it, and then how this is over our career span. So maybe there's things that we learned since then that we change now and do differently. So we'll be sharing that each week. So for today, I have a couple stories prepared. Ashley, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Uh, you can go first. I got my obligatory Stanley cup over here.
All right, I'm drinking
What are you drinking?
it's a Biddy and Bose cup. Do you know them?
Biddy and Bose.
So they're a coffee shop that the founders, they have two kids that have Downs.
Huh? Wow.
So they created a coffee shop to help. Well, that population has a very low unemployment rate.
Right.
So they created a business to employ people with disabilities.
Oh, I love that. Nice little
Yeah.
win for them too. You know?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
they have a location here in Houston.
that's cool.
So
Local,
then
supporting local, but not just like supporting local coffee shops, but like with a mission. That's really cool.
yeah, exactly. So then Tina and I we went there, and then just I went there to just buy a coffee. I ended up walking out like with like $60 worth of stuff, like you
Of
know.
course you did. Of course,
Yeah, just to support. I was like, "Oh, it's such a good mission," like
yeah.
anyway, so I got my
I'm
coffee.
boring over here with water because did I tell you? So on Saturday, yes, Saturday. So late last week, I was feeling kind of crummy, like just like felt like maybe I was getting some kind of bug or something. So I did one of those mobile IV places where they come to your,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
kids thought it was crazy. They're like, "What are they doing? What is that bag? Is she putting a needle in your eye?"
Just because 'cause you're feeling crummy, not hungover?
No, I wasn't. Yeah, no, I was just like, I had like a headache and like I was super tired and like I
Uh,
was kind of nauseous. I was just like not myself. Anyway, long story short is that the lady was like just based on how fast like I sucked all the vitamins and like fluids, she's like, "You're
uh-huh.
dehydrated." And I was like, "Okay, that makes sense." So, water today.
Yeah, I'm drinking a tea,
Yeah.
a oolong tea.
So yeah, lesson learned, more water. Yeah. But yeah,
Nice.
you go first today.
Yeah, yeah. So since we're talking about drinking, I had a so this is during my, the temp days. I get a call from a client, right? And they're like, "Hey, we need you to come out and handle the situation." I'm like, "Well, what situation?" They're like, "Well, your candidate is passed out." I'm like
Like,
sleeping? Yeah, like passed out, like out during work. So this call is at like 10 a.m., by the way,
well,
right?
you also hear of people, like, falling asleep at their desk, like, I've run into those situations, like, where people were sleeping on the job.
Yeah,
So it's not that.
yeah. So there's some that like people fall asleep. Like honestly, I used to get, like food coma after lunch,
Yeah.
right? And kind of like dozing off a little, right? I have to like do some jumping jacks or something. But so she was like passed out. So then I'm thinking, like potential like medical issue. There's some people that have some medical conditions and it kind of makes them
Like,
whatever, right?
diabetics, sometimes, like,
Exactly.
there's low or something, yeah.
Yep, yep. So then I get more context, but apparently she had been like drinking, right? So she had a like
Did
one
they
of those.
smell it on her? Like, how did they know? Is that how
So she had one of those big gulps, right? And with the
Mhm.
lid on it, but then apparently it was like spiked, right? And she had been sipping on it all morning, and then I guess, I don't know the full story of like what she did before, but they found her passed out in the women's bathroom.
Oh
So
my
they
god,
had a
at her desk, like,
Yeah, not even at her desk. So they had apparently at their place they had like a couch or something, or like a little seating area.
in the bathroom, yeah.
Yeah, in the women's bathroom, and then she was just KO, right? And then they could smell it on her, and she's
Right.
like incoherent, all that stuff. So then I had to go there and
You had to, like, go on site to get her and
yeah,
escort her out? Yeah?
yeah, they wanted me there to escort because she's my employee, I
She's
guess, because of the
your employee and a temp for them, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then I had to call a cab for her, and this is pre-Uber, right?
Yeah.
Just to make sure she got home safe and whatnot, and then I had to let her go, like
Well, also, that could have been so much worse because I mean, it's terrible that she passed out in the bathroom, but it's probably better that she, like, passed out in the bathroom than, like, caused a scene or something, like, was disgruntled drunk, you know,
yeah,
made
like an
it
angry
seem.
drunk or
Yes,
something.
yes, like, that could have been worse, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So during the temp days, like you have all these crazy stories of people doing stuff, right? So how would you have handled it as a if you're corporate HR?
So, like, if I was working, are you asking, like, if I was them calling you or, like,
No. Yeah, let's say that's one of your employees, right? And
right,
then you get a call, you're in your office, right? And you get a call, it's like, "Hey, Susie's passed out on in the
no.
bathroom again." You know?
Uh, so it's funny that you say this because, things have changed so much over the years, like, with, like, drugs come into play, like, drug testing and
Uh-huh.
be under the influence, right? Especially with marijuana becoming more, like, I don't know, acceptable, like, with these Delta 8 things that are out there, like this, legal THC stuff. So, I get asked a lot by companies like, what is my discretion if somebody appears to be under the influence of something, right? Alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, like, can I just, like, escort them out and fire them, or, like, what's my obligation, right? Or can I send them to drug test or alcohol test, right? I get
Uh-huh.
questions. So the answer is yes. However, there's some caveats. So I would say that you have to be very careful though, because I mean, in that case, right, in your story, like, it was probably pretty clear. Like, she smelled like it, she was passed out, but there's also, like, sometimes where it's hard to tell, like, people's behavior changes, so that's an indicator, or they seem, like, off for whatever reason, but, you're trying to pinpoint, but let's say it is marijuana or something that you can't really smell, like, like they took an edible, so it's not like they had the smell of marijuana, but there's no alcohol smell, so it gets tricky, dicey to assess it. So,
Yeah.
what I usually tell people, if I'm on site with the person, I'll go with them and we'll assess together. Like, 2 people should be assessing the situation,
Uh-huh.
right? But I think if it's like they're out in the field, I have a checklist, like a walkthrough that's like, these are the things, and it's like an observation checklist. Like, these are the things you want to observe, but then you should also have, like, more than one person observe it so that both people see the same thing. And then if and then and be talking to HR throughout this observation, right? So HR is like, "Okay, I hear you. Next steps," right? So then let's say you wanted to send them to test in that scenario because you really wanted to, you're not just going to, like, it's not a temp, it's an employee, so you don't want to fire them off the bat. You want to have some more information, right? Before you do that. So you can send them to test, but then it gets tricky, right? Because they can't drive. Because what if they're under the influence? You just put them in a
Um,
car. They have an
uh-huh.
accident, they're on work time, it's very dicey, right?
Mm.
So that's where Uber or drivers come into place. But you also, that's dicey too, because it's like, do I put this, like, potentially unstable person in a car with, like, a random person? And,
So would you drive them there or something?
but no, you don't want to put, like, another employee or a supervisor in the car with them too, because at this point too, being the person you're sending could be disgruntled because they
Mhm.
might be like, "Hey, what the heck? Like,
Yeah.
you're accusing me wrongfully," like, right? All those, like, feelings start to come up. So it probably is best to do some kind of car service to get them to the test
Mm.
and home from there. If a supervisor can be at the testing site with them, that's ideal. Like, meet them there because then they can make sure that the person follows through with the testing. If somebody refuses, that's usually a pretty big admission of, the refusal itself is like guilt, kind of.
Mm.
So some people write into their policies that, especially if they have a random program that says we reserve the right to test at any time, they can um, write into the policy that a refusal could be cause for termination. Right.
Yeah. You know what I always think of, like, when I hear the random drug tests,
Hmm.
right, that aren't so random, right?
Yeah.
You watch football, right?
Yes.
So, Myles Garrett,
Yeah.
he's,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
one of the yeah, there was a game where he had, like, 5 sacks or something crazy, and then, like, that following Monday, he gets a random drug test,
Right. Is he on
repeated.
steroids? Probably.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
he?
yeah, yeah, but it's kinda
Um,
like that, right? Like, people show behaviors
right.
or whatever, and then they get called in for a drug test, I guess,
I mean,
or
you have to be careful not to single out, right?
yeah.
Random, if you're going to call something random, it should be random. But
Mhm.
you can do suspicion testing, right?
Oh,
Especially if somebody, especially in safety sensitive job positions, like you definitely want to be 100% sure somebody's not under the influence if they're operating machinery or something of that nature, right? Because that can become a really dangerous situation really quickly. Um, so my biggest, like, I guess, takeaway from that this whole topic is that you have to have really clear policies in place.
yeah. So
You
as
know,
long as you have that clearly laid out, employee signs off on it, obviously, during their new hire paperwork, they're presented that info, they understand these are the policies of our company,
right?
then
You
you're covered?
have to have a pretty clear policy, and there's also people will go as far as to say that your managers should all go through, like, as part of their annual training, should all go through any ones that are like in positions where you potentially are going to, like, test for that. Again, if an office person appears to be inebriated, I mean,
Mhm.
maybe we don't send them to test. We send them home for the day. Like, I mean, is the consequences severe? Maybe not, because they're not client facing or in a safety sensitive position or whatever. But most likely, you're probably going to have something in your policy that says like that prohibits like use of anything, in the work, like, so if they're drunk at work, that's terminable because your policy says it, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of, like, those more tricky situations, like, you may not send them to test, but in a safety sensitive, you would. But you want your managers to have what they call reasonable suspicion training so that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
say that manager is trained on how to identify that someone is under the influence.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
not
yeah,
just, like, guessing, right? So,
yeah,
training, there's policy, there's, like, all those kinda things really come into play because there are I have seen situations where somebody they reasonable suspicion, they sent him to test, the person was negative, they weren't under
mm,
the influence of anything, and then now they're suing the company for discriminatory practices.
yeah,
"You
yeah,
singled me out because 'cause I'm this, that, and the other." So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's tricky. You have to be really careful.
yeah, yeah, like bias training, all that stuff probably, yeah. So on this note, I have another story if you want me to go.
Yeah, go. Keep going.
So
Keep it rolling, Yang.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I have a friend who was a, health and safety, manager, right? And he gets called out to, on the job site, right? And this is working with, like, heavy machinery, that's, like, out in the oil rigs, like, all that stuff, right? And, and everything's fine during the day, and then he has to, to spend the night. So then after hours, they're all, like, just hanging
Oh,
out and
because he's,
just
like, out on a rig, so he's there, like
yeah.
okay. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
"What is
yeah,
he
yeah.
doing tonight?" Okay, got it.
So the foreman invites him to their, I guess, like, their dorms, where they're hanging out. And then he walks in and they're all, like, drinking, partying and stuff. And then the foreman invites him to do some lines with him. It's like, hey, you want to? And then this guy, because my friend, he's like a guy's guy, right?
Yeah,
He's like one of the guys, and
they
he
read him as cool.
yeah, but then he's like, "Dude, I'm the safety manager." He's like, "You can't invite me to do drugs with you. Like, I
Yeah,
shouldn't even be in here, like, seeing all that. You like, I thought you guys were just hanging out playing cards or something. Like, I didn't
right.
know this, and so then afterwards he has to report it, because it's a safety issue, right? And yeah,
Well, and that
it's
one's
crazy.
interesting too, right? Because I actually have worked with companies that are similar where they send people out, like, on jobs, like where they're quote unquote on the clock, but they're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
During the
Yeah. Yeah.
night, or they're like, for instance, a good examples like storms, right? People who work like disaster relief,
Mm,
right? And they get sent to Florida or wherever, right? And so during those work hours, they're, obviously doing safety sensitive type responsibilities, but then at night, they're technically off the clock, right? So a lot of them do drink and go to bars and things like that. And there's really nothing saying they can't do that because they're not on work time and you can't, I mean, it's their personal time. It's when it bleeds into the next day, right? It's still drunk, right? Or in the case of that manager, I mean, clearly, if they were using narcotics or drugs, they're going to have that in their system the next morning, become a very big safety issue. So,
mm,
and just illegal, illicit drug use is like probably cause for termination anyway. But the drinking's a fine line
mm.
because even if I drank the night before and I went to bed and I woke up and I went to work, where's that line of I'm still drunk or I'm not?
Yeah.
So in
That's
situations
interesting.
that a lot of companies will just have the policy that you can't drink while you're like on location or whatever, you know,
Mm,
because and it that's tricky because there have been lawsuits where where people have said, well, that's not, you can't police what I do in my personal time if I'm off the clock,
yeah.
you know?
Or what about like, because nowadays there's a lot of startups where they have like a keg in, in the office,
Right.
right? And then they
Well,
have like
even
happy hour.
this, yeah.
Yeah, and then they have happy hour Fridays, right? Like
Right.
at 3 or 4 p.m. they start, having a little social hour. What about situations like that?
So it's funny that you asked. So there was a company that I worked for, no names involved, but when I first started, I was getting the tour of the offices and stuff, and I noticed right away that a lot of the like manager, or call it like executive level, especially like sales managers and stuff, right, that entertain clients and have very social aspects to their job. They had like some of them had like almost full bars in their offices,
Mm,
liquor, ice machines. Like I'm like, whoa, like you got the whole setup, So, and I almost felt like they were testing me because one of the first questions they asked me was, "How do you feel about this? Like, how do you feel about us drinking in the office?" And I was like, "Look, there is nothing illegal. There's nothing that says you can't. Like, I just, again, it's about setting those like policies and parameters around like where that line is because a cocktail, a beer on a Friday afternoon, probably nothing wrong with that. But where do you cut someone off? How do you cut someone off? And then they're driving home from your place of work. And then technically they're off the clock by then, right? But
mm.
served alcohol at their place of employment and then drove home. So there's a lot of liability in that. So if you're gonna do happy hour Friday, give everybody an Uber code and have them all Uber home. But then, I mean, that's really not convenient because then all of their cars are stuck at work until the next day or Monday, or, I mean, it's not ideal. So you have to think through, like, is it worth it? Is
Yeah.
happy hour Friday worth all the like hassle you're going to have to go through to reduce the liability?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
interesting.
still lots of companies, especially like we're in Houston, right? Like oil and
Yeah.
gas and whatever. Like there's still lots of that going on, but companies are starting to learn that they just have to have better, you know, like they have to tighten the belt a little bit to reduce
So,
like
so then each company can have their own policy behind it. So like one company can have a zero tolerance policy, for example. Another company can say like for us, that's part of our culture is fun, and
right,
team, it's for us, it's like team building and whatever. So they like it.
right.
But then I guess for them, they have to have it like clearly defined out and
Very clearly defined. And they also have to be
Mhm.
very clear in their policy that you don't have to participate.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that people feel obligated
Mm,
to participate or they're not a team player, right? So you can't have consequences for people who don't participate. You have to lay out that it's voluntary. You have to set parameters around what happens if somebody overindulges. Like, I mean, there's a lot of considerations if you're going to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And then I guess like company parties too, right?
Yeah. That
You have
comes
any
at holiday parties, right?
yeah, you have any holiday party stories?
Uh, yeah. I mean, mainly, I mean, nothing like really crazy. I mean, people hooking up, and that's always a problem. I mean, that's really only a problem if like you have a no fraternization policy, for instance, like no dating in the workplace, which again, there's some people who have like loosened the belt on that a little bit just because, especially at companies where people are working really long hours, you'll see it a lot. It's funny, you'll see it a lot at consulting companies
Mm,
that people end up meeting there and like getting married and stuff because they're working like 100-hour like work weeks and crazy things like law offices because you spend so much time. That's where else are you going to meet somebody? Your work all the time, right? So,
yeah.
but I think the main thing is they now is to be careful of just not having people a reporting structure. Like,
Mm,
you're gonna date, like, just don't date your boss because quid pro quo and sexual harassment or favoritism and all those things. But as far as, yeah, back to the holiday parties, like people, like employees hooking up is like, kind of the least of the issues, right? If you don't really care about the dating internally, it's more, yeah, management or executive level management, like doing something inappropriate with their staff or people trying to drive home. Like there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like people, like intercepting people like literally in the parking lot and being like, "Hey, you don't look so great. I don't really think you should drive home and let us call you an Uber." And people would be like, "I'm fine, I'm fine." And you're sitting there like arguing with an employee in a parking lot. Like it's probably not great on Monday morning. Whenever
yeah.
you have this like, because then you have to sit them down and talk to them and be like, we tried to intervene. So more and more companies are getting to this place where they do like they just tell everybody right off the bat not to drive to the event and to like ride share and they give like they'll pay for it and they'll give like a QR code to make it really easy and all that. And or people will say like I need a plan, your transportation plan ahead of time and I mean there's people getting really like more strict with the logistics for these
Yeah.
parties.
Yeah, yeah. Because there's just so much liability nowadays.
It is. I mean, worst case scenario, that person leaves your work event. And what if they're in a company vehicle? That's a whole nother,
Oh,
right? Like you have a salesperson that you've given a company vehicle because they drive, all day. And then that same salesperson comes to your holiday party, drinks, drives your company vehicle home. On the way home, they kill somebody.
mm,
Now they're liable, you're liable, like that person's family or attorneys or whatever are coming after everybody.
yeah,
They just are. So,
that's true.
and there's a lot of people will be like, "Oh, well, hands off, right? We set the parameter of like the Ubers and we did this and they chose to drive." And I mean, that's what the attorneys for the defendant are going to claim, right? They're going to try
Mhm.
to stay as far away from it as possible, but there's only so much you can do and say before they're like, look, there's still liability and
Yeah.
somebody's gonna have to be liable for this situation.
So what's the key lesson with all this?
I mean, I would just say like, see something, say something. I mean, if you're in the workplace and somebody looks off or not right or high or drunk, whatever, like, I mean, the first thing I would say is you need to go to your manager or HR and like have a discussion. Don't approach the person, don't accuse the person, like, just kind of observe and report, right? And then the second thing would be policy. Right? If you have clear policies around what you do in those situations, have clear policies around drinking if you are allowing it at certain events or things. I think it really just comes down to being very like transparent about what's okay and not okay.
Yeah, and trainings, right?
Right.
Need to make sure that you're training your staff, your managers, the team on how to potentially identify these
Mm,
situations, how to assess the situations, and kind of what to do when the situation arises, right?
exactly. That's right.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, let's just cap it here for today. You know, we had a couple other stories lined up, but we'll save those
I'll
for
I've
next.
got a few, like mine were more about, like, ghosting in the workplace, but that'll be a whole nother topic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just talked to Tina about like this new generation and how they work differently compared to, you know what I mean? So maybe we can do an episode about that and
Yeah,
how
for sure.
different work cultures.
Yes.
Sounds good. All right, Ashley, I'll see you again next time. And thank you all for listening and tuning in. And as always, if you guys have stories that you'd like to submit and you'd like to share, we'll post a link where you can share that with us as well, and we'll break those down on another episode. All right.
Alright, thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.